Chris grabbed sound bites. One of which on the YouTube video, if you've seen, was me saying, "Hey, everyone, be sure to get all your coughs and farts out."
Usually, if we have chips, it's just a really loud, crisp, like chew of a chip.
Yeah, me. Rick was always, it was food based right around the mic,
or just like one of those.
Anyway,
every producer's dream.
Welcome to Tabletop Talk. We're your hosts, Kyle.
And Jeremy.
And Rick.
And today we have our guest host, Anthony, with us.
Hey, everybody. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, do you want to give us a quick deal, like how long you've been playing D&D and stuff like that, so the crowd gets to know who you are a little bit and why we should care?
Who are you?
Wow. So I've been playing role-playing games with my friends growing up. I mean, from early on childhood. And then D&D was probably the last off and on 12 years, I'd say.
Okay.
And then we took a break for a few years, and then we kind of drifted apart, and I said, hey, let's all come back together and play D&D. So I decided to be the DM, never DM'd before, and ran a homebrew campaign for 3.5 years with them.
There we go.
And it was pretty good. So
Isn't, hey, let's get together and play D&D, one of the greatest questions you can ask your friends?
We were just talking about this upstairs before we started, me and Anthony were.
And it was an instant yes. Like, imagine if I had said something else, like you might just want to do some whitewater rafting.
That's cool. It's really close to, do you want to do a podcast? You know, and do you want to do a podcast about D&D? And that's great.
Yeah. God bless Matt Mercer and Joe Maglianello for making D&D cool again.
Yeah, I will say that they definitely added to it, and Brennan Lee Mulligan and a few of the others out there really helped push it.
Patron saints of D&D.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Just name drop all of like the Mount Rushmore of D&D personalities. It's great. It's fine.
Well, today we're going to actually be talking a little more about GM questions involving ambiance and running games. Rick, I believe you had some questions lined up.
So part of the essence of D&D is, be it like digitally or in person, ideally, more than just the game itself, but like what the game is like and what it feels like, the ambiance of what you have. So my first question is for those of you who have DM'd, which I believe is everybody except myself, which is perfect that I'm asking the question and not having to answer, is what do you like to use to help build ambiance? And then as players, what's the coolest thing that a DM has set up for you and the other players in a campaign?
If it's good, I'd like to start. This is Jeremy, the novice DM.
I think usually they know Jeremy is the first to answer.
That's great. That's great. Thanks, Kyle. Anyway, as the novice DM, I've run five one-shots at this point, and then 2 of those were connected to each other, and now my latest one-shot is turning into a campaign. But the thing that I really enjoyed was when I co-DM'd with Anthony, and he already had lights and music set for this homebrew campaign that we had. I pitched him the idea of what I wanted to do, and then I showed up at his house, and he already had a dungeon room set up for gaming, and then I was like, oh yeah, we have this lighting, we have that lighting. Oh, and I downloaded this music and that music and that music. And it was great. In my other ones, I've tried to add a little bit of music or artwork, but that is probably the area that I want to grow in most, is trying to spend more time not just thinking about story, but thinking about the environment that you set for your players.
For sure. I tend to do a lot of like minis, and I build a lot of terrain and such. I have a lot of friends who are not as gifted in theater of the mind, and they need visuals, and I have very, very busy hands and a lot of open time. So
yeah, I'm that person who's not gifted in theater of the mind, so I'm always very thankful. Like, Kyle will create, every time you tell him what your character is, he creates a mini for your character. So you see your character and you're like, oh shoot, this is my character. Cool.
I also like to draw people's characters. I did that for like Rick and Trevin's characters for your one shot we recently did.
Yeah, it was great.
It's actually in my binder of my magic cards.
I noticed Trevin, every time he pulls out his notes, he uses it as a bookmark. And I was like, oh, nice. And Liz pulled out and uses as a token for magic her Goliath picture.
Because I am not visually creative. I can't draw. I can't do stuff like that. Can't sculpt and stuff. But my theater of the mind, my like imagination and my internal like creativity is off the charts. Like I can imagine all sorts of stuff. I just can't translate it visually.
Yeah.
So having stuff like that is enormous for me.
I was gonna say it's always fun. What about you, Anthony?
So just to piggyback on what you just said, Rick, like I remember countless times my other friend who was the DM a lot of the times when I wasn't, he was very artistic. And so he would be explaining something and we'd be like, okay, yeah, like this cool character. And we'd be like, okay. And then all of a sudden he'd like whip out a drawing of the character and we'd be going, oh, whoa, like that's the character. I had no idea. And so having those visual aids, I think, is huge, even if you are somebody who is good at theater of the mind, because we all see things a little bit differently. For me, like, I approach things kind of like the Disneyland ride scenario, where, like, you coming into the room is part of the experience. So, like Jeremy's saying, like, to have an upstairs of a garage that was my dungeon. And so I would make sure, like, all the lights were off when you walked in. And there was only like candles leading up the stairs, and you'd hear the music coming in from the thing, or I would rig a smoke machine up so that smoke would be filling the room and you'd see all the LED lights.
This is the moment where our audience is realizing that Anthony is probably the greatest guest that we're ever going to have on this podcast.
That's a lot of pressure.
I was going to say, like, man, where were you when I was looking for a DM?
So it's like, to me, it's like the sensory experience, like from the minute you get there, kind of sets the stage for how people come to the table. And if you can get them before they even sit down at the table, it like changed the way that we did things in the room. And I have a background in live production, and so like sound and lighting and visuals is like my bread and butter, and so it's like the things that I love to do. So we actually, at the end, before I stopped playing with that group, we actually had a campaign where me and the other DM co-DM'd. He did a lot of the like combat stuff, and I focused mainly on that ambience thing, and it was like super exciting for me. And then also I could see how that really changed how the players got into the mood. Like we would start the game and there wasn't any build up to getting ready. They were already there.
Man, that's usually the hardest part, is that getting everybody calmed down to start a game and on board. Because you always have a few players who like to joke around. I mean, me and Jeremy are just as guilty of this.
Whoa!
And we'll sit and we'll talk and joke the whole time, and then we'll be trying to calm down. And I'd say we're pretty good usually at calming down faster than we used to be.
We've gotten much better.
Yeah, but it used to be you and me would sit and joke and accidentally talk over the person not noticing, but not really the case anymore. Again, I think we've been growing as players and DMs. So.
Yeah, I do like the idea of the second they walk in, it is the show, because when you leave space for anything, people will either joke or they'll go, oh, let me pull out my character sheet and see what else I can add, or let me go through the book, or let me get on my phone, which is the worst. When it's like, let me get on my phone, and then you're like, oh, this is cool on Instagram, and then you start and they're like, oh, let me just look a little longer. It's always tough to try to combat that. And so I think that was really fun DMing with Anthony on that time, because I was trying to do all of this stuff that was completely new to me. And I had the assistance of someone who could help do that other stuff so that I didn't have to worry. So like this last time when I DM'd just by myself, this is the third time I've done it with just solo. And starting out is tough because I still have so many things I'm trying to add in last minute and so many things trying to figure out. So my next one, having that set right away would just be phenomenal. And that is a definite goal.
I think that's actually the goal for our set here as well, is to eventually set up better space and add some rigging like lighting and stuff like that. I really want to get into that. Producer Chris and myself have talked about adding some of our own music in the background, which I know, Anthony, you do music as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
You write and play music as well.
Yep.
So do you ever use any of your own stuff for it, or do you like find some of the free stuff online, or something that you like movie soundtracks when you're using?
Yeah, I
audio
mainly
cues?
just found music that I could find that was already done.
Okay.
Because I mean, anybody that's DM'd knows how much work it is to DM on a regular basis. And so I would have loved to create my own, and there was times where I attempted it, but I'd get halfway through a song and be like, well, shoot, that was half my planning time. I should have just actually planned a session.
There we go.
But I think like you really do have to balance how much effort you put into that, and also like batching that stuff out. So like I had all my music already picked out in a audio program with a button switchboard that I could just, oh, it's battle music. Okay, boom, here's the button.
Nice.
I don't have to do that every time.
Yeah. And then the second question I have is, as a player, what is your preference for that ambiance? Do you like the ease of technology, using stuff like D20, any of the platforms that you can play digitally on? Do you like the tactile, like learning space of having like miniatures, some stuff built up, a grid board, like what have you? But like, what are the physical aspects of playing that fall into your category of like your ideal playing environment?
For me, honestly, I think, again, the music and the lighting is awesome. I've never had that done for me. I've had the music done. It was Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool, though.
Even outside of a pirate or like seafaring campaign, that would still be great.
It was definitely great.
You do have to be careful with that sometimes, because some people hear a song and it takes them to a different place.
I will say I'm one of those people, so that was kind of a problem. But I had my ukulele because I was also a bard, and I now know how to play He's a Pirate.
Oh, see, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Otherwise, I mean, I do like using theater of the mind, but a lot of our group either I'm not describing it well enough that they're not seeing it, or they're just not as fluent in theater of the mind, which that's okay. It's a crapshoot with D&D who you're going to play with. No, I like having the minis and stuff set up there as a visual. And for me, I like to build easy, quick, removable things. So I have like one big platform that's like, oh, this is dirt, or this is grass, this is whatever I need it to be, with quick, easy moving parts on there, so I can move you guys through a cave system or through a labyrinth or something without being like, well, here, hold on, let me get the forklift to move Castle Drosselmeyer over here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of swing between extremes. We started with Roll20, and I was like, I had a map for every single location that they were in.
So many maps.
And it was so many maps. It was so tedious. Just did not work very well. And then I think really like theater of the mind for everything except for combat. The only thing you really need battle maps for is for when there's some sort of tactical thing where I need to know exactly how many feet away from this person I am. And then I would do like Kyle, like where I'd have some simple battle map things that I could quickly whip out, like, oh, bandits attacked you on the road. I didn't know that was going to happen. Let me quickly find something here and make it work. And then I would try to go all out for the big battles that were going to happen. We had one time where we designed like a 3-story mansion that had like traps in it, and every room was
awesome.
It was awesome, but that was like weeks of work leading up to that.
Yeah,
I wouldn't do that for everything, just the big ones.
Yeah, I'm a definite. I know I said I'm not gifted in theater of the mind, but I absolutely love books, and books is just theater of the mind. You know, but the problem with me listening to it like an audiobook versus listening to someone else's, they're like, I go, oh, I'd like to do this. And they're like, oh, you're not even close. I'm like, oh, shoot, I have to figure out all the logistics with theater of the mind. So I'm 100% with you, Anthony, that I love theater of the mind for everything except for combats. And I still can do combats, but it's not really as good for me because when I see the battle map, I go, oh, I'm this close to that person and I'm that far from that person. I bet I could do this and then that, or I should escape this way versus theater of the mind. I get so single focused on like whoever is doing their action at that point that I forgot where everyone else is spatially or how many people there are. It's like, okay, we got them all in New York. There's still 10 more bandits, Jeremy. I'm like, wait, where? You didn't, what? And so I do like the idea of doing battle maps, but I will say one other thing I already said I like Kyle's minis that he does. And I love when people do either a map of the world and like one of the major buildings in an area. Like this is the castle. There was one session that Kyle did. This was probably 15 plus years ago, where it was in a cave, and Kyle had built this styrofoam cave with multi-level stuff.
I still have it, and I was going to use it when we did Lost Mines of Phandelver. It's actually the first cave in there. I rebuilt it all out of foam. It's made out of pieces that kind of go together, and I'm be messing with those pieces pretty soon here. Now that I've got my table foam cutter, I can actually make it a little easier instead of trying to use like an X-Acto knife on like 2-inch thick foam.
So that one was fun.
A really good point, though, is like when you are designing your set pieces, build them with modularity in mind for future. Like just because that was something you did before doesn't mean you can't tweak
for sure.
it
Well,
and use it down the road
each of the
too.
pieces, like each of the platforms, they're not attached. So I did separate things. It's like, this is part of this chamber, and I have several pieces that they plied onto each other. So it'd be like, oh, you have steps that go up here. But I've used them also in other one-shots that Jeremy has seen. Like we did one where they went into this red dragon's cave, and I needed to use some quick things. So I threw down some of those to make just perfect little cave tiles that had building things to give them some range, some places to hide behind, to climb up on, places to get thrown down from, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, and one thing I want to add too about Rick, your question overall is that I really do think that like it really depends on the context, and certain tools are good in certain situations, and you really don't know those situations until you've used them a bunch of times. And you've seen where they work and where they don't work. And so if something doesn't work for you the first time you do it, doesn't mean that it won't work in another scenario. Like computer screens, I think overall are pretty blah in comparison to like real terrain, but it is so much easier.
Convenience-wise, it's so much easier.
I mean, I had a small like TV above my head that I could have on a second monitor that I could throw things up on. So if I needed to quickly find a picture of something and be like, here's the monster you see. I don't have a mini for that because minis take time, but I can quickly throw something on the screen.
And money.
Lots of money.
Yeah, I'm with you there too. When I was thinking about like Roll20, initially I just go, in person is so much better than Roll20, but Roll20 is a necessity for online gaming. And then I thought about one of the other groups I play with, and I was like, oh yeah, Jim he draws maps and puts them into Roll20. He has all these characters that he, throws out to you, and you have so many things at your disposal that are not always at your disposal when you're playing in person without computers. And I forgot that we've been playing online for, I think, 3 or 4 years now, but we used to play in person. And it started out as just whiteboard, but we did transition to where we were playing Roll20 in person. And so everyone had the compendium, right? So they could quickly because there's so many times when you're like, can I do this one thing? And if you're constantly asking the DM, can I do this? What does this do? Can I do this? What does that do? Right? It slows down the game. So I could look up one of my spells and just go, what is the area of effect? Or what is this? Or what is that? And then Jim is pushing stuff out to us that all pop onto our screen at the same time. And it was a lot of fun. So I'm with you that it just depends on who you are and how you use it, and don't just rule something out until you kind of tested it out.
Oh, for sure. And I think it'd be wrong to say any of these ways are right or wrong. It just depends who's doing it. Like we each have our preferences. I do think online tends to be easier for map building and stuff like that, but it's not as fun as when I pull out like a piece of foam and I get to carve out a little like thing from the Underdark.
Yeah, I think like Roll20 and those kind of platforms are a necessity in today's day and age, where you don't always get to play with the people in the same room or the same city as you.
Well, especially like when COVID hit.
Yeah, that's when we started playing, was during COVID.
Yeah.
That's when I started too. So it was, you couldn't play without it.
Yeah.
And like the mechanics of rolling and like scoring and things like that are so much easier digitally because it does it for you.
Yeah.
And it's just immediate, like, okay, I need to roll 3 D20s or D8s to calculate damage. And rather than taking the time to roll one, notate, roll a second, notate, roll a third, notate, add up. Okay, here it is. It's boom, instant. So for calculating scores, it's unmatched.
Yeah.
But there is something about the in-person experience and kind of what you guys have talked about the like being able to like present something to the game in that moment. It really harkens to like playing a video game and you're like just frolicking along, la 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 la, and then the boss music kicks in.
Yeah. And I think like it's so much easier. Like I'm trying to capture the people and get them involved.
Yeah.
And you have to work so much harder in the digital space to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, countless times I'm like, you're on Amazon again, aren't you? Yeah. I was just searching for this or that. I'm like, yeah. I get it.
I get distracted super easily.
It's easy to
digitally playing can be challenging for me, but in person, I think it was all three of you a little bit, but just saying like the theater of the mind works, but having something tactile for a challenge,
especially for combat.
Yeah, but that's what, like I said, like the boss battle where the music kicks in and you're like, okay, something's about to happen. I should probably save my game right now.
Yeah.
Being able to be like, okay, you guys stumble upon a field, and when the DM reaches for something and then puts out a grid on the table, you're like, oh yeah, we're about to, and then he goes, and roll for initiative. And you're like, okay, this is all right. We like roll sleeves up, like everything that could be distracting is now off the table, gone. And you're like, this is the moment.
Yeah. Well, and as a DM, I feel like it's so much easier in person. People are a little more forgiving when they see you actively looking for stuff, where online people will be like, I said I do this. I said I do this. Anthony, I said I attacked Jeremy. Anthony, what's taking so long? And Anthony's trying to find the rule because he's pretty sure my rule thing is not at all how that goes.
Well, and even some of the nuance of like how much a DM has to do in the middle of a game. The one shot we did recently where Jeremy was the DM, we're all deliberating about something, and off to the side, Jeremy's just roll. And I don't remember who it was, but they noticed like, what are you doing over there? Jeremy goes, oh, you'll find out.
That was our Dr. RPG who noticed. And, but the other thing, sorry, I was going to say about the in-person too, is when you can see your players' reactions, it makes you want to do a better job. Whereas when you're on computer, it's hard to tell because you're not seeing what they're doing. And if they're quiet, like Jeremy, for example, he's really quiet when he's actively listening to like when you're playing. So in person, I can see that he makes good eye contact or he's looking at whoever. When we're talking online, I have no idea if he's even still there. Half the time I'm like, Jeremy, are you still there? Is your mic broken? And he's like, yeah, I'm here. I'm listening. But it gets hard playing online, I feel like, when you can't see people. You start to question yourself as a DM when you're not getting a response visually and all. And yeah,
online ambience is tough.
Yeah.
It definitely sounds like that idea of like an online DM, online ambiance can be a bigger topic, I think, for us to discuss. And I think we should definitely dive in deeper into a future episode.
I agree.
To maybe like figure out ways of quote unquote fixing the online ambiance.
Yeah, especially since the majority of us here seem to have real beef with online stuff.
Definitely. But to close out today, granted, we have someone here who has invented interdimensional travel and transported his home into the Underdark for ambiance in Anthony. But what I want to close with is 3 easy ways to improve or elevate the ambiance of your playing in your campaign.
Oh, I love that. And I actually don't want to answer this. I just want to listen to Kyle and Anthony talk if you guys are okay.
Of course, that's why he loves it. Anytime he can throw either of us down a stairway.
But he loves to talk. You think he'd want to answer.
Lifting you up. let it be known for the viewers that I was gesturing, lifting them up to the heavens.
Oh my
That is the
gosh.
ambiance that I just gave them.
And, you keep using that word. I don't think any of us are using it the right way. Sure, yeah. Anthony, do you want to start with your first one?
I would say just because like you hear me talk about like the crazy things that I do. I mean, that's what I love to do, but it doesn't have to be that to actually be impactful. So like the three things I would think of would be like lighting. Like it doesn't have to be crazy. You could shut all the lights off in your room, put up some candles on a table. There's your ambience, and it will dramatically change the way the room feels.
That's so easy.
Yeah, totally.
But it makes a difference. I mean,
it's huge because now they think like, okay, this feels different. Now I'm going to act different. Then music again is huge. The soundscape that you have, but it doesn't have to be complicated. I would spend kind of setup that you have. Like if you want to have a cityscape, you know, they're going to be in some battle tracks, some just kind of
maybe on the road music.
Or some ambient, just kind of basic stuff that just kind of fills the void in there is huge too. And then lastly, it's kind of a weird one, but it's how you play your characters as the DM. How you voice your characters changes the ambience of the room, makes your characters come alive, immerses the people in the game so that they feel like it's more than just a card game they're playing with some friends.
I like that. And this is Jeremy again, novice DM.
The guy who didn't want to talk.
I know. No, Anthony said voicing characters and I didn't think of that as ambiance, but that's something I like to do. And I was going to tell you, when I finished DMing for them, I got in my car and I immediately did recordings on my phone for the voices so I'd remember what they sound like.
That's smart. That's the problem I have half the time.
I will say there was an excellent Jason Statham character in our one shot, and if it wasn't D&D and built for the character, it would have been the levels of intense of distracting. But it was absolutely perfect. A lot of oys. Yeah. It was perfect. It was absolutely perfect.
That's
so
awesome.
Players can bring to the ambience too, like in the way that they act and their characters, and the way they dress, and the tools they use too.
For sure. As for me, I like to do little gift things for people to try and add a little ambiance. So like Jeremy mentioned, I like to get minis, paint them up, and do them up for people. I like to sometimes do pictures of their characters, something that really kind of gets them in their mind state, like, oh, wow, so this is so cool. Because I don't know about you guys, but when I have a visual in my head, it's a little easier for me to picture how I want to portray this character now, and keep to portraying them. The other things are I like to build very quick, tiny little terrain pieces to add into a little bit of things that I try to decorate the room around. I haven't been able to the last few times because of moving our studio around a few times, but we're working on it. We got some board games up right now, but I like to try and fill up the room with like minis and different things out there so people feel like, oh wow, here's all this cool stuff, reminds them stick in the game, stick to character. And then I don't do this as a DM, but as a player, I do tend to carry at least one instrument with me if I'm a bard. And I like to strum it on the side there or play it not distractingly. So I'm not, pulling out a guitar and all of a sudden like playing Freebird while Anthony's trying to like describe a scene and just screaming over him.
We've all had that player.
Anyway, here's Wonderwall.
But no, just I like to take little string instruments like my harp and such and just pluck it off to the side where it's a quiet thing, and if there's no music going, it fills in the deal there. So
yeah, I like those. Once you were talking about minis, I was just thinking about how sometimes when we're playing, you just have different miniatures around that aren't even for the game. Like they're just there, and so just kind of you're like, oh yeah, there are dragons in this land. Oh yeah, there are giants, and you're like, oh yeah, there are elves, and you just see all the different minis, and that does just, even though it's not a part of your current story right now, it does help immerse you, and I do like that.
Well, and I mean, looking at that stuff, it gives you something too, because not a lot of players do this, but you sometimes like to make up, or as a character, I like to sometimes make up things that have happened in my past that are relevant to the moment all of a sudden. So it might just be like, oh, wait, I might know these ruins, and I'll like, or I rolled really well, and Jeremy's like, yeah, you're able to interpret these ruins. That may not make sense for my character on normal things. So when I go to then tell Rick and Anthony what I found, I might go, yeah, no, well, while I was traveling with some drow back a few years ago, we ran across something really similar to this, and they showed me quick readings. So what I understand it, and then I repeat back what the DM does. And with just like the minis and like little pictures lying around, it just gives, I feel, those who are not as quick on like something planned out in their head, something that they can look and just go like, oh, right, sea elves. There are sea elves in this world. So yeah, that's how I got good at swimming. I learned from a sea elf. And all.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys for all of your inputs and your answers.
Yeah.
And I like that we have more or less come up with a topic for a future episode as we will at some point dive into fixing online, since that's a major component to D&D. It's how I know it's how I started.
Yeah.
Because I started really playing during COVID, and one of the guys I played with lives on the East Coast. So online has to work for some people. So tune in eventually, someday, when we jump into fixing that.
When we fix the internet.
Yes.
Tabletop Talk fixes the internet.
Oh man, it is an epic endeavor, but we got this. So otherwise, you know, Tabletop Talk. I think it's time for Tabletop Talk out.
I do hope that Chris titles it that when we do talk about it.
Tabletop Talk fixes the internet. That will be the title of our episode where we do jump into online.
Yeah.